For one car company, it's not where we've been, it's where we're going. That's this week on Motoring 2006.
TSN's Motoring 2006 is brought to you by the new Q from Quaker State. Unleash all your horses. And Michelin, a better way forward.
You know, a recent poll, while interesting, should not come as a surprise. It showed that more American car buyers are purchasing foreign-based brands than they are from the big three. And Jim Kenzie will have his thoughts on that later in the program. And you know, there are many reasons for this trend, but I really think that a car company from South Korea is a good example as to why consumers are changing their spending habits. And that company is Hyundai. Remember the pony? Well, that was then. Check out this latest J.D. Power initial quality poll. First thing that you notice, of course, is that Porsche is #1 ahead of Lexus. But the big story is that for the second time, Hyundai has finished ahead of companies like Toyota and Honda. Now, this poll is based on the number of problems per 100 vehicles after 90 days of ownership. And you know, this week, we're going to check out a vehicle that really got Hyundai on a roll as far as introducing fresh product. And that vehicle is the Santa Fe.
There's been a complete transformation in our product, and I think the start of that transformation really was the first generation Santa Fe, when the factory had gotten not only just the quality but the design to the level where it needed to be to compete against the North American market.
With the next generation Hyundai Santa Fe, what we tried to do is expound on the design presence of the outgoing car with all the character that it has, and evolve that into something that's very, very pleasing to a broader audience. The front of the vehicle has a very, very strong, dominant front end. There's a boldness, or what we like to refer to as an assertive face. It carries over a lot of the design cues from previous Hyundai vehicles, but incorporates it into much more modern vernacular.
The engine's been upgraded. We now have a 2.7 liter with 185 horsepower and a 3.3 liter with 242 horsepower. So everything's been upgraded, and the style in particular has become more European, flowing lines, a little different from where we were in the past, but we think it's a really good move up.
We spent the morning in the 3.3 liter engine version, the 7-seater, and it's looking very good at this point. It's quite a nice vehicle. The redesign has worked really well, much more stylish on the outside, and a much better, more comfortable interior than than the first generation Santa Fe. I like the new engine. It's got a good power band. It's the equivalent of vehicles a lot more expensive than it.
What were the highlights for you?
I would have to say the ride and handling, especially the suspension compliance, and definitely the top-of-the-line 3.3 liter V6 Lambda engine, which is very smooth, very sophisticated. Feels like a Lexus engine, really.
I think our key competition on the Santa Fe is once again Toyota. The RAV4 and the Highlander are the two vehicles that we're really going up against and pitting against. I may be biased, but I think our truck has a lot of things that it offers that those two vehicles don't.
I think it's going to attract more buyers to the brand that we haven't seen before. We still have the Tucson, an award-winning vehicle that's in the compact SUV. This is a little larger, so those people who wanted a Hyundai SUV that was a little larger can now get that option.
I don't understand the people who buy 7-passenger small SUVs. There's too many compromises. I understand why somebody like Hyundai would offer one, because people seem to be demanding it. Why they don't just buy a minivan instead, I don't know, except to say that they're also vain that they can't be seen in something called a people mover or a soccer mobile. That's all I can figure out.
We're ecstatic about the results of the latest the 2006 J.D. Power IQS initial quality survey. We finished at the top of the pack of all non-luxury brands, and we finished ahead of Toyota, and we finished ahead of Honda, Nissan, Mazda. It's a testimony to what the factory has done for this company. This is the first time I can say this truthfully, that I believe that a lot of our product is better than most of our competitors, and it's a great feeling.
The Santa Fe is continuing Hyundai's relentless march upscale. Very much so. It's a much better product, a much more sophisticated product than the previous one.
It's another step in rounding out and maturing our lineup to get to the biggest range of consumers in Canada that we can get to.
Back in the day, American cars really were the best out there. More later on Kenzie's Corner.
Every now and again you drive a car that just is so much fun it takes a week to wipe the smile off your face. On this edition of Test Drive, well, we've got that very beast. The curvaceous back end, well, it belongs to BMW's new M Coupe. Ever since 1972, BMW's M division has been turning good cars into great cars. Such is the case with the new M Coupe. On the surface, it looks to be nothing more than a Z4 with a fixed roof. However, slip behind the wheel and you find out just how different this landlocked missile really is, and in one serious hurry. You know, this M Coupe has got an awful lot of highlights, but the brakes have to be one of the better ones. To begin with, the rotors are made out of two pieces. That means that fade and the risk of warping them is kept to an absolute minimum. And when it comes to stopping distance, this thing is unbelievable. From 100k, it takes 34 meters or 2.5 seconds to get to zero. That means the brakes are twice as powerful as the engine. The M's 3.2-litre inline-six engine is a technical marvel, especially when you look at the numbers. To begin with, it joins a very exclusive club as it's one of the few naturally aspirated engines capable of producing more than 100 horsepower per litre of engine displacement. In this case, it churns out 103.1 horsepower per litre for a total of 330 stampeding stallions. The net result means that each stallion is only required to move 4.43 kilograms of automobile, and so the M Coupe has an enviable power-to-weight ratio and an incredible turn of speed. It'll gallop from rest to 100 kilometers an hour in 5 seconds flat. You know, whilst it's true the interior of this coupe is a little tight, in other words, you don't want to be much bigger than my 5'10" frame, everything is all about the driver. Tilt and telescopic steering wheel, dials that give you the information readily, and all the controls fall readily to hand. However, the highlight are the sport bucket seats. These things hug you without being confining. The best part being the shoulder support. When you're hard in a corner and using this thing to its max, you stay put. As the engine generates 262 pound-feet of torque at 4,900 RPM, 80% of which is available at 2,000 RPM, this engine excels in the mid-range. The power band is so broad that even when caught in the wrong gear, the engine still manages to dig down and haul the driver out of trouble without having to shift the 6-speed manual gearbox down a cog. Mind you, put the M Coupe in the right gear and it turns the 80 to 120 trick in 3.3 seconds, which is blindingly fast. As with the interior, the back end of this M Coupe, well, it's a little tight. As well as being to do with the physical dimensions, it also has to do with this big box that's stuck in the corner. When you take the cover off, you'll find the tyre inflation kit and the battery. Now, whilst it doesn't work wonders for the cargo capacity, it does help the handling. Simply moving this mass to the rear of the car gives you a better weight distribution front to rear. The M Coupe rides on front struts, multiple links at the rear and anti-roll bars at both ends, all of which has been tuned to deliver incredible handling. Watching it negotiate the pylon test tells you all you really need to know. Add razor-sharp steering, a variable rear differential lock and perfect front-to-rear weight distribution, and well, the M feels as though it pivots around your backside whenever it's tossed into a corner. Finally, there is a state-of-the-art dynamic stability control system just in case you do manage to put a wheel wrong. However, unlike so many, when you turn this one off, it's completely off, as in absolutely no intervention whatsoever. So be warned. Yes, this M Coupe has compromises, and yes, it's less than practical. However, the upsides more than make up for all of those shortcomings. This thing, unlike so many sports cars, has one very special thing going for it, and that is you don't get in and drive it, you get in and wear it, so man and machine become one, and that is when the fun begins. It's time to update our long-term Grand Vitara. Now, when Suzuki got into the SUV business, it did so with a very small vehicle that was underpowered and had a tiny, narrow track. The net result, if you tackled a fast corner or had an evasive maneuver to do, well, it was a pucker-inducing moment. The Grand Vitara, on the other hand, well, it is positively mainstream. It's got a wide track, good wheelbase, plenty of power, all-wheel drive, electronic stability control and anti-lock brakes. The bottom line, it's now an entirely predictable package, and indeed the handling has been one of the highlights. More on that on our next update.
Gentlemen, the MDX concept from Acura.
Well, this is the second evolution of the MDX. The initial was introduced in 2001, and it was class leading, a benchmark. Actually, it was a standalone vehicle that led its class. At that time, only the RX 330 and the ML had been introduced as a near luxury SUV. So we basically created the best of both worlds at that time. The first 7-passenger SUV in the near luxury SUV category. Nürburgring track tuning, the European influence of especially with the European competitors. You know, now it's a different ballgame with the X5 and the Porsche Cayenne. There's a lot of different Europeans that are coming in and performance SUVs. So we had to tailor this vehicle to be more towards the driver-oriented performance SUV. So we added that in the passion, driving excitement. We're going to be having a class-leading V6. We'll be introducing many new technologies to enhance the performance of the V6 itself, and we'll be introducing class-leading fuel economy as well. Many of the cues you see in this MDX concept will be reflected in the actual vehicle.
The company vehicle on motoring is a 2002 GMC Yukon. And you know, I was driving around the other day thinking, you know, we've never had any major problems with vehicle until I went to depress my driver's side power window. And guess what? It didn't work. Well, we're going to head to the Quaker State garage where Bill Gardner tells me I'm not alone with this problem.
Well, Brad, you're right on your diagnosis. The window's definitely broken. There's some bad noises going on inside that door when I actuate the window switch, and no action taking place at the glass, so we know that the window regulator inside this door is broken. Now, if you've got a GM full-size pickup 99 or newer, or any of the sport utes that are based on the full-size GM pickups like the Yukon, Yukon XL, Suburban, Denali, Escalade, any of those full-size sport utes. They're great vehicles in many respects. They're the fuel mileage king of the full-size sport utes, by the way. If you talk to owners, they'll tell you that. Lots of good things to be said about them, but there's a weak link in every chain, and the weak link in those vehicles seems to be this power window regulator. And it's not a question of if they're going to break, it's a question of when. So if you own one of these vehicles, I strongly suggest you pay attention to what we're going to do here today. It's not difficult to do. If you watch closely, You could do it yourself quite easily, save a whole pile of money. We're going to speed it up through the magic of TV. You can see all the steps. It's pretty straightforward and you can go to town on it. First thing you want to do is put one other window that's functional down so that you don't inadvertently lock yourself out of the vehicle. Second step, if the glass is already up, tape it up to the top of the door so it can't fall down. If the glass is down, you have to gently get it up to the top and tape it off. Third step is to take this pie-shaped piece out of the corner, just a couple of clips so you get your fingernails in there and pop it out. Next step is to get this lock button off. If you're using a screwdriver, tape up the tip so you won't tear it, or use something that won't tear the upholstery. Next step is to take off this control panel here that has the window switches, the locks, etc. And it just pops out. It locks in at the back and two clips out on the outboard side hold it in. Next step is to take this surround piece off around the inner door handle. Start at the rear and at the bottom. You can actually pop it off with your fingernails. Final step is to remove this whole inner door panel, and it's just held in with a series of locking lugs. So all we're going to do is just give it a bit of a smack and lift it upwards about an inch, and you can see that it starts to disengage. Then you can pull it aside gently, unplug things like this clearance light over here, and separate that panel from the vehicle. Next step is to take off this vapor barrier. Take a magic marker and put some score marks on here so you'll get it back in the same spot. It'll just make life easier when you're done. Okay, we've plugged in the window switches back to the door, and we can see the culprit right here. This is the cable that actuates the window regulator, and it's snapped right there. And you can see it's trying to pull back in. Oop, there it goes. And that's the problem with these window regulators. The cable snaps, and when that's done, you're putting a new one in. Next step, up in these two openings here, two 10mm screws that pinch the glass to the window regulator. There's a rubber strip in the middle, and you just have to loosen these two screws 5 or 6 turns so the glass is no longer pinched, and take out 1, 2, 3 screws at this end of the regulator, and get your new window regulator and overlay it so you'll see which screws apply. Take those 3 out, and 1, 2, and 3 over here. Don't touch this one or this one, because these hold the guide plates for the glass in. If you take that one out, it'll fall down and stick to the back of the speaker magnet. That's a rookie mistake. You can fish it back out and put it back in the door if you make that mistake. But pay attention to what you're doing. So the next step, that hook right there is hanging it. Just lift it up slightly, move it inwards, and it falls right down in the door. This hook is hanging the back end. Lift it up slightly, a little bit inwards, and it falls down in the door. Just guide it out and lift everything out through this big opening. Now we can see there's our cable that snapped. Now we've got to detach the power window motor from the regulator and put it on our new regulator assembly. Okay, we've transferred our window motor onto the regulator, so it's ready to go back in. I hope I remember how this thing goes back together. Good idea to put a dab of Loctite on all the screws so they don't come loose every time you slam the door. Next step is to plug our motor in. If you watch through this opening, you'll see the cradle come up. There it is. It's right at the edge of the glass. There, it's all the way struck out against the bottom of the glass. We're going to tighten that little screw with the 10mm head. Tighten it up so it pinches the glass via that rubber piece in the middle. Do the front one, do this back one. Tape can come off. Gee, I hope this thing's going to work. Oh, there we go. We're back in business. The window's working the way it should. So it's just a matter now of reversing the procedure that we used to disassemble the door, put back the lock rods, the inner door handle release, the vapor panel, that plastic barrier, plugging in all the wiring, etc., and putting everything back together, just basically inverting the order we used to take it apart. One thing to keep in mind, if you're doing this in low temperatures, winter time, etc., make sure that the vehicle is up to temperature or inside a building where it's warm, because you don't want to deal with those plastic bits when they're cold. Sometimes they'll break before they'll release, and that's a good rule of thumb for any trim on any vehicle. Don't deal with it when it's really cold. You're asking for trouble, likely to break it. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 2006.
Earlier in the show, Brad mentioned that over half of new cars sold in the United States now are foreign branded. Actually, Canada's been there for a few years. We also were talking earlier about quality coming out of Korea. So if the Americans had to worry about the Japanese, well, maybe the Japanese have to worry about the Koreans. The question is, why are foreign brands doing so well? And why now have they finally matched that 50% mark? Well, part of it is sales of big pickup trucks and big sport utilities are down, and those are areas where the domestics have always done particularly well. But I think there's also a couple other issues. First of all, these foreign branded cars aren't foreign made. Most of them are built, many are here right here in Ontario, many of them in the southern United States. Secondly, it's almost become an image sort of a thing. Back in the early days, anything built in Japan was considered to be junk. Nowadays, anything built in Japan is considered to be high quality. Not necessarily true, because while some Japanese companies rank at the very top of the quality scores, some of the Japanese are not so good. The other issue I really think is weird is the whole image deal. If you bought a Toyota or a Honda and you told somebody at a cocktail party that you'd done so, you'd get no questions from anybody. But if you told somebody that after 15 years of buying Toyotas, you went out and bought a Buick, they'd look at you like you were crazy. Because Buicks are considered to be old-fashioned, old American cars, something your uncle might have driven. But you look at this Lucerne, it's gorgeous, it's got great performance, it's got tremendous features inside it. It costs $33,000. So the question as to why people aren't buying domestic cars, the answer is, I don't know. I'm Jim Kenzie.
Needless to say, Hyundai is expecting big things from their new generation Santa Fe. As far as I'm concerned, they've taken a good vehicle and made it better with a contemporary look. And of course, Graham will have a closer look in a future test drive. Before we go, though, a reminder to check out the Motoring webpage. As you know, because of TSN's generosity, this program airs more than once a week, so you can check out the times and also content by either logging on to tsn.ca or motoringtv.com. That's it for now. We'll see you next time out as we continue to bring you more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
Every vehicle, if you're only going to buy 2 new tires, match the tires that are on your vehicle and put them on the back. This is true for front wheel, rear wheel, or all-wheel drive.
TSN's Motoring 2006 has been brought to you by the new Q from Quaker State. Unleash all your horses. And Michelin, a better way forward.